Minister, I am glad to get the opportunity to once again raise the issue of housing and homelessness in this House. It is particularly important given the fact that we as political parties and movements will soon go before the people in an election proposing our different plans for how the next government should operate and what its priorities should be. There is no doubt for myself or Sinn Féin that housing is an issue of utmost importance. We believe this is also the view of the general public, who have clearly over the last few months voiced their great dissatisfaction with the current crisis. The media have also played their part in raising this issue. More recently, although for a long time they ignored the crisis as it was developing, preferring to take the government's spin at face value. Sinn Féin have thankfully been to the fore in skewering that spin so carefully crafted by the government. This is a government quite clearly more interested in seeming to be doing something than actually tackling the issue. We have all heard the Minister repeatedly announce the same money again and again in different press releases and pronouncements. We know these pronouncements are spin, we are on the ground, in our communities, and we know that the houses the government claims they are delivering are too often not new homes at all, but simply new transfers from rent supplement to HAP or RAS. Far too often they are simply smoke and mirrors or the work of other bodies like the voluntary housing organisations. Delivering housing for this government is slang for more subsidisation of the private market without any real increase in the social housing stock. The government can throw around claims of billions, but the fact is that councils in this state now receive 80% less funding for housing construction than they did before Fine Gael and Labour took office. The fact is that this government has built less social housing in its lifetime than most governments before built in a single year. The facts are, between January and September 2015, local authorities built just 28 social housing units. They did not build so few because they didn't want to build them, but because they couldn't. They couldn't build them because this government has starved them of funding for 5 years, while lumping a property tax on any social housing they have already and a site tax on any land they could build on if they ever got the money. They did not build because this government didn't want them to build, because money promised was not delivered on. This government have even removed the ability of councils to buy housing at cost price from private developers by gutting Part 5 and allowing developers bailed out by the people to opt out of their responsibilities by offering properties for lease. A lease arrangement which will see the government pay for refurbishments to these private properties in years to come as they revert back to developers having made a handsome sum in rent over the preceding years. Housing and those in need of housing are quite clearly not a priority for this government, and claims that they will be in a month or a year are utter nonsense. The priority for this government in housing is lining the pockets of developers and protecting the precious market from any interference which would require it to function in a way which meets the needs of the public. On Budget Day 2016, the government announced NAMA would build 20,000 homes for sale. They claimed these would be affordable, but Minister Kelly, you later made it clear this was meaningless, estimating the homes would cost, in your words, no more than €300,000. Hardly affordable, that is. Worse than this was the plan for these to be starter homes, which in the dictionary of government spin means cramped at best. Little wonder when Minister you set minimum standards for apartment size, which would not allow spaces for the required rooms to fit in the apartment. The 20,000 homes were heralded almost as if they were part of a misleadingly titled social housing strategy. But these homes are not intended to be social housing. They are not intended to be any part of any defined affordable housing scheme. The plan is simply for NAMA to be supported in building housing to profit to bailed out developers. Given the way NAMA has operated, these properties could easily be snapped up by a major REIT for cheap, so the public can be screwed even more. Over the last 5 years, we were told again and again that NAMA would deliver thousands of social housing units. And Taoiseach even claimed there would be 4,000 during the local elections. So far, just 2,000 have been delivered, mainly through social leasing and not social housing stock, or not part of the social housing. NAMA cares as much about social housing as this government does. I welcome the sentiment of the motion by Fianna Fáil, but it is quite strange for a party which created NAMA with such a weak reference to a social dividend to now be calling on it to deliver 10,000 social housing units. No one is fooled by this posturing. Fianna Fáil created the property bubble which caused the housing crisis in the first place and began the privatisation of social housing long before Fine Gael and Labour got their chance to make things even worse. Sinn Féin have tabled an amendment to the motion to include a number of other points which we feel are essential for tackling the crisis as it stands. These include measures to address unaffordable rents. The government failed miserably last year to do this, introducing a pathetic delay in rent reviews, which resulted in most renters getting exorbitant increases in November and early December. With such puny housing construction, you know quite well it's true. Your friends at Fine Gael overrode you on this one. With such puny housing construction figures from the government, tenants can expect equally exorbitant rent increases as their next rent review. Rent controls and rent certainty are the only solution for this emergency situation, which should have been tackled in 2013 at the latest. Allowing the PRTB and local authorities to set a local standard rate and tying future increases to inflation, which has not been above 5% in recent memory, would bring real security to tenants. Instead, we now have 95% of people on rent supplement unable to meet the demands of the private rental market. This is a systematic problem which cannot be dealt with by well-meaning housing bodies on a case-by-case basis. Regulating rent would allow for an increase in rent supplement, which would not result in higher rents. Labour have the shameful record of having cut rent supplement not once but twice in this government, and that has actually put families out in the street. Sinn Féin also want to see major investment in the construction of social housing. The government have only actually earmarked €312 million for council construction as part of the first tranche of your strategy, but it is clear very little of that has been delivered, and by September 2015 only €11 million had been given to councils for housing construction in the preceding 9 months. A government that cared about housing the people who need it would spend less time moving money from one department to another and pretending it was new money, and more time focusing on using that money and the fiscal space to build social housing through the councils, as well as providing affordable housing and cost rental. If the government really wants to address the housing crisis, it will support the Sinn Féin motion and act on its proposals. The solution is clear. We need to build social housing. We need to build affordable housing. We need to regulate rents, and we need to keep rent supplement recipients in their home. If we continue to subsidise the private market without regulating it, if we continue to deny the state's responsibility to build housing, if we continue to treat rent supplement recipients at risk of losing their home as exceptions rather than the rule, then we will get nowhere. If we do continue on as we have, then we are accepting that children will be raised in hotel rooms and hostels in this so-called Republic in 2016. I don't accept that, and neither will the Irish people. The government promised to end homelessness in 2016. Remember that promise. Your predecessor made that promise, and at the time I argued and said it was impossible, but she blatantly said it would be ended in 2016. It's really ironic that since that promise, homelessness is at its highest. 73 new families a month in the last month have been reporting on a monthly basis. There are at least 130,000 applicants on the waiting list. and 5,000 people are homeless. And according to other sources, that there are people that are not being taken into account who are homeless, particularly foreign nationals. There are 1,500 people on men, women and children at B&Bs. And that is a scandal. That is the real scandal that we have here. Thank you.